I think right now we're all creative directors. If you're an indie game developer, you're actually a creative director. What does a creative director do? Hey everybody, I'm Brian McRae, and if you're new here, I talk about all things game development, game design, and what it means to be an indie game developer. So let's talk about what a creative director does, because I think if you're an indie game developer, you're doing this role, and I think it's important to kind of unpack what that means. Well, if you just kind of look at what the words are, you're directing the creative. And so what is the creative? The creative is the project, the creative direction of the project. So in this case, we're talking about a video game. And the video game is full of creative aspects. You have the game design, you have the game story, you have the game art, and you have the genre of the game. And so all of that falls under the umbrella of the creative director. Under the creative director are things like art directors, and then lead artists. There's also, game designers or game directors would be underneath a creative director. A creative director is almost like a C-level organization, leader, almost like a CEO, because you're not only plotting the overall direction of a project, but in many ways, the overall direction of the company, because the company that you're in as an indie game developer, your company is a very creative company, and the project that you choose is your most important decision, and how you spend your time on that project is the most important decision. And this is what a creative director would then do, is decide what is the project, what is the scope, and what are all the creative aspects of it. Another thing that a creative director does is has an understanding of the market, has an understanding of trends, has an understanding of audiences, and also has an understanding of the team's strength and how the team can succeed with the flow of the market, with the flow of the audience, and all of that. And if everything could all kind of line up, you might be able to create that luck and have that hit game, have that hit project. And I've been able to do this twice. And I feel very fortunate for that. But that luck was created not by chance. It was a very calculated thing. And it was because of very carefully looking within, looking at skills, looking at market, looking at genre, and deeply analyzing the creative and the art direction and all of that. It all comes together in a package. And so today, all of us are becoming creative directors. You have to understand what your strengths are. You have to understand where the market is and where you think the market's going to go. So there's going to be that, but there's also, the idea of scope, of genre. And then you have to kind of also line up your passion with that too. Because if you're not passionate about the project, you're probably never going to finish the project to the point that it is a viable product that can be, played. So all of that needs to line up. And once you have all of that, then you could get into things like the art direction, the story, the the music. What's really cool is after you kind of pick, you might pick one of those, right? Like something that I do sometimes it's just a character that I come up with, and I'm like, okay, that character is really cool. I don't know the genre yet. I don't know what the game loop is. I just know that I really like this character idea. And I might have that character in my mind for years, just running around and thinking about what I could do with this character, and thinking about what kinds of situations the character could get into, thinking about what kinds of environments, or there's a lot of world building that could kind of happen. And that's an aspect of creative direction I really love, is the world building and sort of the story aspect. Now, this is something that in the realm of video games, it's like, it's important, but it's really just sort of the cherry on top, right? Like they say that nobody really cares about your story unless the gameplay is good. But if everything all comes together in a cohesive way, it just makes everything all the better, right? So if you have good creative direction, it makes all your design decisions, better. And you could really theme things out a lot more. Your UI could be more themed. The music could be more themed. For example, I'm working on this horror game called Whispers in the Corn, and it's set in a cornfield in the Midwest in the 1990s. And it's a very personal project for me because I'm from Illinois, and I went to school at a college that was surrounded by cornfields. And I'd always drive through these long, straight roads surrounded by these cornfields, and for as far as you could see. And it's a flat horizon. If you've ever been to the Midwest, it's a little surreal, especially if you're in an area that has mountains and hills and that kind of a thing. You could only really see so far in any one direction, and then that's it. You don't see too far off in the distance. So it's like you have a fog of war in any direction that you look. And so I think the other aspect of it is it's, from my memory of that time is I was really into playing guitar, still am, love playing guitar. I was really into acoustic guitar, and people in the Midwest, especially at that time, loved guitar-based rock music, sort of rootsy acoustic stuff. And so for the soundtrack, I thought it'd be great to have, our kind of focus on acoustic guitar for the soundtrack. And that's a little strange for a video game. There's not a lot of, at least I can't think of many that feature an acoustic guitar. But I think that's what's cool about creative direction, is if you're gonna have a game that's set like in a farm, you're gonna want instruments on the soundtrack that are probably gonna be more, natural and rustic. strings like, violins and, piano and, like I just said, guitar. Those kinds of instruments could work really well for the soundtrack. Visually, what about the time of day, the lighting, the feel, all of that, the color palette, all of that plays a part in the look and feel and the cohesion of the project. And when you get into the story and the lore and all of that sort of thing, it starts to talk to the design. It starts to talk to the scope. It starts to influence the behaviors of enemies or monsters, or that kind of a thing. And it just, when that happens, it just kind of keeps heightening everything. When you have something that has good creative direction, it just winds up making the piece, I like to just say, crystallized. And I guess what I mean is like, it's just so strong, and yet so perfect, that you couldn't imagine any one thing different. Like, for example, the show Stranger Things, I think, is just such a well done thing. I mean, could you imagine if the logo for Stranger Things was even slightly different? I couldn't. Or the opening, music soundtrack for it, or if Winona Ryder wasn't in it, or anything like that. The storylines. If it was set in the modern day instead of the early 80s, it wouldn't have been as good. And you could go down the list. Think of, this is a good exercise, is take a look at some of your favorite works and analyze them. Really get down into it and think about what makes it great. And it'll help influence and inform your decisions on your project.